I can't believe this. I am Corey Philly. I can believe that. And I'm the executive director of the Vancouver Fringe Festival. And we are on the last day of the Fringe, September 18th. Woot and a woot. I'd like to acknowledge that we are in the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. It is an honor to live, work, fringe on these territories, and of course do the podcast on these territories. We are in the beautiful Leap Creative Studios. We're here with the magical Burkeville Productions, Marvin and Ken. Well, they tried to make me feel a little less like I haven't been up till 2 o'clock in the morning at the Cabaret of Bullshit, which was enormous fun. But also it's like, I go to bed earlier than that now. I need sleep. And it's been 10 days sort of that, which is good. I have a few things I just need to say as a housekeeping. So hold it. Merchandise. Okay, merchandise. Still available. Also online. You can purchase it online and we'll mail it to you, or you can come pick it up. We're happy to do any of those things. But look how beautiful. Look how beautiful. Also, we are having our awards night tonight at the Improv Center at 9 p.m. It is a pay what you can or donation, and basically all of the different awards that we have cultivated over the last 6 months. So let me see if I can figure them all out. The TYP Award with Carousel Theater is going to be there. It's going to be announced. The Joanna Morato Award, which is a mentorship program, that's going to be announced. Cultivating the Fringe Award is going to be announced. Leaping Fringer Award is going to be announced. And the BC Touring Council Award is going to be announced, as all the Spirit of the Fringe Award is going to be announced, and the Artistic Risk Award is going to be announced. So that's 7. So quite a few things. And all of those have money or time, or money and time attached to them. And really thank you to all our partners, Leap Creative Studios, Carousel Theater, the Vancouver East Cultural Centre, the BC Touring Council, I think that's it right now. If I can come up with more, I'll let you know. And we are always incredibly in debt to anybody who wants to support the Fringe and the artists who are at the Fringe. And so very, very cool. Also, of course, we are in the very last day of the Fringe. There's still tons of things to happen between here and I believe about 10 o'clock tonight. So you'll want to go to vancouverfringe.com and take a look at what all those things are. And I also want to say, depending upon how we end this podcast, thank you. You know, it's been quite the ride for 11 days. We have actually arrived here. I can't believe it. I actually did not know if I was going to make it last week, but I'm so happy that I did. And I'm so happy that all the artists have returned this year, all the audience has returned this year. It's been very, very cool. Very good experience. And my first. So very exciting. So we are here with Fina Pipia. She has an amazing show called just Ha Ha, right?
Yes.
Ha Ha Da Vinci.
Yes.
I always put a third Ha Ha in there.
You're welcome.
Ha Ha's in there. And you are up at Studio 16, right?
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, Fina, thanks for coming.
Of course.
And I would just like to talk about you entirely for this whole thing.
Okay.
And if you don't mind, I ask everybody this: which city were you born in?
I was born in Los Angeles.
Oh, in Los Angeles.
Indeed.
Okay. Is that where you reside now?
It is not, although I pass through frequently. I have lots of friends there and a sister there.
So. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I love visiting. Yeah.
Where do you live now?
I live in part on the road playing shows, and then I'm based in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle and Port Townsend, Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Really beautiful part of
The place to be.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. And very lots very similar to the
Right
climate
around
up
the
here.
corner, yes.
Yeah, for sure, right? So when I was at the Cabaret Bullshit last night, you were playing the tuba.
Indeed.
And so I guess my question is twofold.
Okay.
What kind of got you into theater? What made you catch the bug for that?
Okay.
And how long have you been playing the tuba? And how long? And why did you get into the tuba?
Okay. Let's see. That is manifold question.
I know. You can start anywhere. Sorry.
I love it.
That's my morning right now.
I love it. Yeah, I got involved in theater sort of accidentally, kind of. I guess that's partly true. My dad is a magician. My mom is a musician. And so...
Did they do that because it rhymed, magician and musician?
They should have. I don't think that was intentional. So I kind of grew up in a house where there was lots of illusion and music happening all the time. And it was kind of part of life. And I don't think that we were necessarily pushed into it, but I think when you're surrounded by that, it's like what you learn and the sort of what you kind of take on and the skills you acquire as a young person. So I ended up going to dance school, and so I have an undergrad degree in dance performance, and that my first kind of early work as an artist was as a professional dancer in New York City, working with Julian Barnett, a choreographer back there. And so then really was curious about making art that was a little bit more, the dance scene felt a little bit small. Like I wanted to share some art that felt like a little bit more like more people were excited about seeing it. And you didn't necessarily need to like decode things after a show for the general public. So yeah, I ended up starting to play more music, and I was trained as a classical vocalist, but was on a tour. I was heading out on a tour with my sister and a bunch of other sort of circus vaudeville performers. The tuba player was not able to come, and so my sister said, we could probably do that. And so, yeah, we took a bus down to Eugene. We found a couple of old sousaphones someone there was selling, and booked a couple of extra seats on a Greyhound bus for the tubas, and came back up. And 2 weeks later, we went on tour, and we played shows every day. And we're kind of thrown into the fray just by virtue of the fact that there was sort of a tuba necessity. And
tuba emergency.
Yeah, tuba emergency. The best way to learn on the job. So yeah, it was sort of happenstance that I fell into the whole tuba thing, but I really fell in love with the instrument. And as a high soprano by training, it was a total thrill to be on the other side of that kind of body of instruments. You're really driving an ensemble when you're on the bass line. Yeah. And so that's just been kind of a journey of kind of delving into that, learning more about it, playing a lot of bass music. So that was sort of the entry point. I hope that I answered all three of your questions.
I'm going to ask more questions. So first of all, your sister is also a person who's a performer.
Yes.
And it's just the two of you, like as siblings?
Yes.
Yeah, so in my family, I'm like the anomaly, right? Like I think sometimes that's very often
totally.
Everybody's so not into the arts, and
definitely.
then like there's one little person going over, I want to be seen over here. I'm the last of five. I say it that way because I'm the last of five. So,
okay, right.
So how I guess my question would be, so you obviously are, as you said, you're a classically trained vocalist. So did that translate into like doing, I don't know, musical theater, or how did the theater become then part of that experience? I know a little bit about the contemporary dance area, but and I do understand what you're saying about deconstructing it for people after you come into a space where you're just going, well, what did you think? What do you think it is? It's a turtle moving across the street. Did you see that? Anyway, so what was that kind of entry point in from going, okay, I feel like I need a broader sort of, platform for what I want to do.
Totally.
How did you sort of kind of go from singing, which totally get that, into sort of doing more vaudeville to vaudeville?
Right. Gosh.
I know it's not a straight line. I'm not expecting a straight line, but
yeah. So I think I was doing these dance shows in New York, which was a ton of fun and such an amazing learning experience. And my sister, again, instigator of many things, she said, you've been writing these songs kind of on the side. These songs are really good. She's always great advocator, which is good to have.
Yes, very good support. Yes.
Yeah, she said, what we should do? We should really, write some musicals together. And I was like, well, I learned in school that nobody cares about your art until you're in your 30s. And she was like, I don't believe that for a second. So she was like, go rent a theater. Go rent a theater in Lower Manhattan. There, you can rent, we rented one of the Crane theaters, which is, Lower East Side. And I was like, I remember going and being like, what am I doing? I think I was like 21 years old. I was like, oh. You have to get like your like fire insurance card or whatever. I was like, this just feels like way too official. And so we started writing and producing musicals, and they were just bonkers. I mean, really, like goofy musicals. We ended up taking them to some Fringe festivals early on as well, and we had, you know, this kind of fun little New York, you know, very, very, very unusual shows. We called them postmodern musical reviews because they're sort of song and dance numbers loosely strung together by this kind of plot that you could kind of tell it was happening. And we just had a blast, and it was this kind of magical time where I think, you know, we knew so many young artists who were really hungry to work, really excited to make new work, and really hadn't yet gotten, like, these are people who like ended up with like phenomenal careers, you know, in theater and the arts. And so kind of this fun window where people were, you know, not yet fully employed. We were all just trying to figure it out and like living, you know, these kind of crazy lives. And so yeah, we ended up writing, I think, 5 or 6 musicals together. And that sort of segued into me working more as a singer-songwriter. And that segued into me taking up the horn because that was sort of a necessity. And then when you play a little brass instrument or bass instrument specifically, it's really delightfully, you know, people are really hungry for bass players. So as opposed to being a high soprano, there are many, many of us. many. You know, I was like suddenly working with these really amazing musicians who, you know, were like just playing music in a variety of genres. Yeah, so you know, I sing some opera in my show, and it's, you know, that's not something that I tend to do really anywhere else, but it's my early, you know, I studied voice in college on the sly when I was at conservatory, because they don't let you do 2 majors when you're in a conservatory setting, but I sort of snuck over and, you know, connected up with a voice teacher, and so that was a very circular answer to your question. I'm so sorry. I sort of went off the rails there.
No. I just for context, I did know that I wanted to do theater.
Okay.
I did go to a theater school for contemporary arts.
Yeah.
But it was at the time when I arrived in there, it was an interdisciplinary.
Okay.
So you had to go to another discipline and do something else.
Amazing.
And
right.
I definitely doubted my ability to play any kind of instrument, but that's where I ended up in the dance. So I switched over to contemporary dance, where I was often using the example of what not to do. But I felt fine about that.
Right.
There used to be this here, I'm sorry to segue into my little world.
No.
There used to be this guy, Grant Stratty, who was the head of the department of the School for Contemporary Arts. Lovely man, very strict, very old school.
Right.
And he was one of the, I think it was a National Ballet of Canada. Like he was one of the first principal dancers in that. So he was like very, you know, posture, as I say, very posture. And so he would take me out. So there was I can very, very much recall a moment where I was in the studio and we were just doing, you know, little jumps, little plie jumps.
Sure, right.
And he brought me out, and I was just over the side doing my thing, and he brought me out and go. And he was just like, okay, that is not what you should be doing.
Oh, no.
And I said, oh, come on. And we were having a whole conversation while I was doing my little, and he was going, and I said, oh, come on, I'm better than I used to be. He said, well, sure.
Oh my God. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, very funny. I mean, because I never aspired to be, you know, a ballet dancer.
Sure, right.
It was
totally.
So it didn't really matter to me, but
Yes.
it was sort of very funny when I think about what that sort of little expansive journey was, right? Where you're kind of in this very much more strict space,
totally,
than I had.
Totally,
encountered.
yeah, absolutely. That's so phenomenal, because I feel like I was constantly kind of pushing out of that more formal environment. Like I had tons of guilt for years for not continuing to pursue dance, because I think that kind of scene really, like, at least from my perspective as a young artist at the time, I felt really like you are supposed to do one thing, you're supposed to do it really well, and that's how your career trajectory is supposed to go. And I just like, I like couldn't quite, I didn't want to just stay in that one kind of zone. And so, but I didn't feel like I had that, like, sort of like, yes, you should be taking these, you know,
Right, yeah.
I was kind of like, I'm sneaking over here, to, you know,
Excuse
I
me.
am,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, really.
I think it is interesting. And also it's really interesting to me that you, you know, you kind of threw yourself into this, like, you know, this other world where you were kind of a little impresario for a number of
Very
people.
little impresario.
Well, yeah, but this is how these things start. Like, you know,
Totally.
it starts because somebody wants to do a thing and other people agree that they want to be there to do the thing.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very interesting.
Yeah.
I guess my question, so from there, in those people, as you say, I got on to have better careers, whatever. But my question is I was also told when I was in my 20s that, you know, you should get through your 20s, your 30s you'll actually be able to have work.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting message.
It's a strange message. And it felt very out of reach when you're, like, when I was 24, 25.
Right. I mean, it feels like your 30s are like ages away.
Yeah, I know. Sadly, that is not true.
It is so not true. Yeah,
Yeah, for
right.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common message. I mean, I think that there's something to that in that it's really important to like stay humble and not be like, I'm gonna do the most phenomenal thing right now, you know, and like to have that kind of like, yeah, there's a lot of people making a lot of amazing work, and like I'm very new to, you know, like when you're sort of just entering the field, you're like, this is something I've never done before. So I think having that, like entering with that kind of like a sense of like humbleness is something that's really important to do, and like something that's really important to keep, because that doesn't go away. Like, you know, everything you make is going to be this like new, you know, oh, interesting. But yeah, I feel like there's more of that kind of like fear talk, like, you know, than there probably should be I think. It's just my opinion. I think there should be a little bit more like.
I mean, I think artists are like, can be a precarious existence, and can also be like, you know, you're still working from project to project and all that kind of stuff.
Totally,
especially if you're
right.
an independent person like yourself,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And also I think, you know, the ability to stay open and curious and vulnerable professionally, that's your professional job to do that.
Right.
It's hard. It's a very hard thing. So
Totally.
you don't just get all the good emotions about all that stuff. You get everything, right?
Totally. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
So how did you come back out to the West Coast? Like, so there you're in New York. You come out here.
Right.
What brought you here? Just because you wanted to come back to sort of...
Yeah. You know... I was really like, my family's out here.
Yeah.
I have this beautiful community out here, and I really missed that. Yeah, it felt like the right transition to make, and it also felt like at the time New York was really expensive, still is. And I was really, really keen to make my own work, and I felt like having the sort of means to do that, and the time and the space to create my own music and my own shows, it just felt like it like wasn't tenable, like it wasn't sustainable. I mean, we could have made it work, but it felt like I wanted that sort of sense of like space to do that, and I found that on the West Coast sort of more easily. So that was kind of the impetus, and I stayed mostly because of the community. Like, I feel still very held here because of all the friends and colleagues and family, and I feel like that's, you know, it's like it takes time to build that, and it's incredibly valuable. And so yeah, that's been the draw, and it continues to be the reason that I'm on the West Coast. Yeah, primarily. So.
Well, you're looking for a life plus art, like, you know,
exactly.
You can't just be one thing, really.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Totally.
Because you can't do, basically, the art feeds the life feeds the art. Like, you don't know what those things are.
Exactly.
Cool. That's interesting. So now, is this your first show on the Fringe, or no, a Fringe circuit? Not our Fringe, but necessarily a Fringe circuit.
Yeah. No, I've done a handful of other Fringe shows. but this year is my first year doing a solo show on the Fringe circuit. So that's been really exciting. That sort of feels like a rite of passage.
Yes,
you know?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. So that's kind of been a big moment.
Like, congratulations. Yes. That's all cool. That's all cool.
Yeah.
Now, did you, obviously we're coming out of the last couple of years, and did you find that kind of a fruitful time for yourself? Was it I'm sure it was difficult. It was difficult for everybody, but some people felt like they could create during that period of time, and some people felt like, please just let me eat potato chips.
Right.
How did you feel during that? Well, perhaps a variety
right. Complex emotions.
Totally. About my existential reality.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really, really painful transition. I mean, it was just like I felt like it was like going through a breakup with your life, like I was like, I'm having all of the painful emotions of like withdrawal from like these things that feed me as a person, simultaneously just like frightening, and all of the things that we were all experiencing in a variety of different ways, obviously. And I was really lucky to be in a safe place, in a little town on the West Coast. But I found ultimately, once I was like through that little tunnel of sadness, that it was really fruitful.
Oh, great.
Totally so. I mean, I think that there's this kind of so almost exhausting like pressure to perform constantly, I think, and like to constantly be putting out material as a performer, constantly be booking shows, playing gigs, and to not have the option of that. Mm-hmm. It was the first time in years that suddenly there was this sort of open plane of possibility. And I recorded an album, and I wrote a songbook and illustrated a songbook so that when I play shows, I can, have this kind of collection of work that people can take home and play, which, these are things that I had like on a list for probably, a decade. And that I just, it's hard to carve out the time for those things. And then I made this show, this Haha Da Vinci show. So I had been in residency at Centrum Arts Foundation in Port Townsend, like a week prior, I think, to the shutdown, and was like gearing up for, I was going to finish writing the show and then go on tour. And obviously, big shift, that didn't happen. And I ended up just having this like huge breadth of time to develop the show. And, I think that the show went through 25 script drafts.
Yeah.
And
that's a really good, interesting thing to say to people, because often, especially I think if you're a solo artist, you have the luxury sometimes of like keeping on changing it, because it's just you that you're actually affecting.
Right, yeah.
But that is a very usual thing, that there's multiple drafts before you get it. And some people are still like, even though they've been touring it for forever, right? They're still
developing it, right?
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Totally. Totally. So that was kind of, just, it almost felt like weird to say, but it felt like this gift, because I didn't know how much value that amount of time could have. And then also, I'm a performer, and there's this like, even though I think it's really, it's so important to just separate yourself from that kind of like validation that you look for from an audience. And I feel like I knew that was important, but it's a really hard thing to know how to do. And I think that amount of time where it's just like, yep, I'm just going to make this work, and just be really curious about it. It sort of allowed me to grow out of that desire for like, oh, I hope people like this. I was like, I hope people enjoy it for themselves.
Yeah.
I like it. It's like, that felt like the biggest thing, it's like suddenly, oh, okay, like now I can focus on actually the creative process, as opposed to like thinking about what people are going to be thinking about this,
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's really hard as a, whatever your discipline is like to, when you're actually doing it as a developing something, is like what my theater teacher would say, because this is what my theater teacher would say.
Yeah.
You take your judges, and you send them out of the room.
Right.
You say, you say goodbye,
Yeah,
bye,
yeah,
bye. And then you just get to sit there and write whatever it is or do whatever it is.
Totally.
Without it being like a result driven or anything like that.
Right.
Even though in your head,
Yeah.
you know, you have a result you want. I mean, like,
Totally.
you know, because we're human.
Totally.
But it helps a lot. And also just finding a way in which to do that complements where you want to be, right? Like, sometimes, I mean, I'm a writer as well, and sometimes I just do little tricks for myself so that I'm not constantly reworking a particular section instead of going on to, like, you know what I mean, just do it.
Yeah.
And then, give yourself the latitude to do it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then it was like this interesting sort of almost like science experiment. I finally did the show, and I was like, oh, people, like, they find this funny too. Like, oh, people gasped there. Interesting. Now it's like this sort of more, like an objective, like kind of investigative process.
Yeah.
Where, you're like, when you, I don't know, for me, I had no idea what people would think of the show. I was like, I don't know. I've been in a room by myself for 2.5 years. This might be total, like, just a ridiculous idea. So to have that kind of, like, no idea, because, you're kind of in this process, and then go out there and be like, aha, aha.
Yeah, we have to relearn our social skills. Like, we have to relearn about
dude.
being right? I mean,
brutal.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Like, I was fortunate. I mean, at the time, I don't know if I felt it this way, but I was fortunate that I had a job where I had to go to every day. I mean, we were kind of shut down for maybe 2 or 3 months,
Totally.
but I was going in like twice a week.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had a job in an art center, and I was doing other stuff and trying to figure out what next to do.
Right.
So I was always in relationship to like people and how to work with COVID, right?
Totally.
Essentially.
Totally.
And so very, very different relationship than I have two people. I know my married friends been in one 800 square foot space together for that amount of time.
Yep.
And and they're still very wary. Not that they shouldn't be, but I have gone. Sometimes I'll say, well, if you want to see me, I just want to let you know, I'm very much in the world,
right?
Like, I'm very much in the world.
Yeah, you're like out there. Yeah,
that
totally.
kind of thing. It's very different, and same thing for performers and writers and all those other humans. All of a sudden, they're back in front of people where they may have been having a moment of, like, quite internal experiences, right?
Totally. Oh my God, it was a bizarre transition. I mean, I think the first show, like the first stage show that I did was with my sister at Moisture Festival in Seattle. And I've been playing smaller gigs, but, it's just, like, different when there's, like, proscenium and an audience. Okay. And I've been performing for years, and, like, I was terrified. I was like, I don't know what it's going to be like out there. Like, hands shaking, and it was such an interesting experience because we went out, we did our bit. We have, like, a double sousaphone song and dance act that we do.
Of course you do.
And, the crowd was just, like, so enthusiastic, and we left the stage, and my sister was like, we could have done anything, and they would have just been delighted. They haven't seen a show in years.
Just take it.
So yeah,
take it.
But it was this, like, it was so interesting how frightening it was to be in that position, because it was like you really had stepped back from being in front of being in, like, rapport with an audience, with a group that big, and kind of. Yeah, like, you step out there and you, like, build this relationship with people, and that's, like, a hard thing to work back to. I feel like I'm in it now, but, that's, like, the transition was painful.
Yeah.
The transition out and the transition back in, I found to be like, both frightening, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. And I can recall, because in my previous job, I was doing a lot of live streaming with these lovely humans here.
Awesome, yeah.
And for a while, we had a little bit of audience. Like, we could get, like, 20 people maybe into this very large theater, which was kind of, and then all of a sudden it was gone. And then for, like, 6 8 months, we didn't have anybody in there except this crew. And then all of a sudden, we were able to have people back. And it was like, I remember standing there, not thinking, like, because you kind of get used to it. Like, you get used to what the reality or the limitations are. And then I was, like, sitting there going, and I actually felt so emotional that there was audience again. Back in the space. Right? And because it was so lovely for the performer, and then, just very, The whole other character's been missing this entire time.
Yeah, it's the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would love you to talk about Ha Ha Da Vinci, and also just like, what was the origin of the story? Where did you get the idea from? Anywhere you'd like to start on that one.
Okay, sure. So yeah, it's the kind of impetus for the show was learning about this gentleman, Luca Pacioli, who lived during the Renaissance. He wrote what is considered today the first book on sleight of hand magic. And the book is filled with like these very sort of Renaissance style effects, and number effects, and Leonardo da Vinci illustrated that book in real life.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that's exactly what I said. Oh, wow. Really? It just fascinated me. And they collaborated for a big chunk of both of their lives. And I just thought, like, what was that collaboration like, And what was that kind of dynamic like? What else might they have been working on? And that kind of sort of was the sort of pivotal kind of idea moment. I was like, that I want to explore. That feels like there's some real discovery. And so, yeah, I started just experimenting, brainstorming, and for a long time there were these two characters, Leonardo and Luca. Now there's another character who travels back in time, and that was a whole discovery process in itself. Yeah, so it was a kind of like opening like pop-up book, and like there are like all of these different little dynamics. Like every time I thought of one thing that would kind of like lead to this other thing, the Vitruvian Man. Like, I wonder what would happen if I became the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man like delivered the message of like how to return to the present, and what. Of course, Luca Pacioli, like, I feel like if you landed back there would be this kind of, like, element, this sort of unusual element where anything really could happen. Like, there's a bed in the show where, the bed plays music, right? And it's, like, kind of this, like, ooh, like, of course Luca Pacioli would have a bed that played music, and, like, Leonardo probably would have, designed that, and, this... kind of elements of like science magic. Ooh, what is that? So yeah, that was the impetus of the show, and kind of sort of just followed it from there.
Really interesting. And was there? Can I ask, how long had you known about the story, or did you come across the story, or the, what I mean? It's not really a story. It is a story, but the facts, the history of those two people. Like, were you reading a book? Were you watching how did that sort of, do you remember?
Yeah, I think that my dad told me about Luca Pacioli. My dad's a professional magician, and so, he had mentioned this, I think even like maybe years ago, and I've been like, sure, that sounds cool. And I think at one point he was like, no, this is like kind of an interesting thing. And then actually my sister and I wrote a children's musical about Luca Pacioli and Leonardo da Vinci. Totally different show, different kind of story, but there were 25 kids in the show, and there were all these musical numbers that we created, and different sort of Leonardo da Vinci contraptions that happened. And I was curious, like, how I could tell the story from a one person, like how I could sort of take this story that we'd told with 25 kids, tell it with one woman. Right. A little bit of a challenge, but I was kind of started brainstorming that. And I also, really wanted to make a show where I could use all of these different disciplines that I'd worked in to tell a story that felt sort of interesting and important to me. So that was almost kind of like a structural challenge. Yeah. That just from a practical standpoint, I was like, okay, I want to make sure that there's, each of these disciplines is included, and I don't want them to be gratuitous. Like, I want them to be essential to the telling of this story, and I want to actually like take the audience on this journey with me. So I don't want it to just be like she feels like she can dance. So, do a little dance number. I kind of wanted there to be this kind of like,
How
and
nice for
here,
her.
yeah, like who cares? I don't know, like it doesn't really matter. So I felt, this desire to kind of, here's a story, here are these really interesting people, and here are the tools you get to use to tell the story. There you go. you know, and then I kind of like use that.
Yeah.
So that was...
That's very cool. I mean, well, and also, listen, you have all of these particular gifts. It makes sense that you are looking at people who did also very, like, Da Vinci very much was like
amazing,
multi kind of
Pretty
artist, right? Kind of everything. So, it makes sense that you're kind of looking at that and wondering how that influences you, when they're writing it to some degree, I imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, that being said, and you've kind of given us the background of it, how would you don't have to do an elevator pitch, but how would you describe the show? I guess my question is that I get why you were interested.
Yeah.
I get why the story happened. I get why you did the thing.
Sure.
Is there a larger theme that you were sort of exploring around that sort of made it really compelling for you?
Yeah, I think the kind of cornerstone, like kind of kernel, was this idea of like creative risk. And what is that like with two people, and like the kind of like love is the best word that I could probably use. I don't even know if there's really a word, but I feel like there is this kind of like experience in creating this feeling, and I think you can take that really far. And I was curious, that's really, it's really about just taking that step into the unknown and doing that because of that like feeling. It's like just the intensity of feeling, like the need to create, I think is really fascinating. And I saw that in Luca Pacioli, and I think that's what I kind of see in Leonardo, this kind of, Leonardo's a genius, right? So like you can say whatever you want about him, is like, but I'm curious about like that feeling. That really is, I think, what the show is about. What's it like to take that step, to not know where that leads, and to do that with another person as well, or to do it on your own. Yeah, I think that's kind of what the show is actually about.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I think I think it's really I think I use this word. It's like, how do you be vulnerable enough to the new ideas, of willingness maybe to be in the room again?
Yeah.
Knowing it's gonna be something that you're gonna have to gather towards you versus something that's just sitting there for you.
Totally.
And I also think I often call artistic work, depending upon how people are, but I'm going to go with me, sort of obsessive, right? It's a little addictive. Like it's the thing that both feeds you and torments you, right? At the same time at times.
Totally.
And sometimes it's the thing you can't imagine living without it, and at the same time you're just like, ugh,
totally.
I could just stop for a moment.
Totally.
Yeah. And it's certainly things where every time I've seen, Leonardo's work, especially his sketches, I think, where, he's got I think the famous ones of the hands and things like that, is like, you just think how meticulous this is.
Right.
How many hours spent doing this thing over and over again, or getting it right. Very, very interesting.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay, so that's interesting. So then my question would be, if I came up to you at a party and you said, what are you doing? And you go, I'm doing a show called Ha Ha Da Vinci. And I say, what is that exactly?
Right.
And
what
you
is
say,
the show?
what is like, how would you describe it? So as an audience member, if they were going to go see it.
Totally. So this grad student discovers that Leonardo da Vinci and his collaborator, this magician, real life magician, Luca Pacioli, invented the first time machine. And she's accidentally zapped back to the Renaissance, and it's up to her to investigate their work so that she can find a way to return to the present. So a tuba lantern lights the way, beds make music, paintings take on a life of their own, and a radio delivers this hidden message from the past. in a show that essentially combines illusion, music, and theater to tell a story that is at once silly yet profound. So
well done, you.
Oh yeah, that's kind of how I think about the show in a nutshell. And I hope, you know, like, I think the idea is that if you come to Haha Da Vinci, you'll leave feeling that anything is possible.
Ooh, ah.
Yeah.
That's great. That is a great, great line. That's a great line. So tonight is at 8:15?
8:15 at Studio 16.
16?
Yep.
You can still get VancouverFringe.com tickets for there. And just before we go, and I
Yes.
wanted to ask 2 questions.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
One of them is, you said you wrote an album. I don't know what they're called anymore. I'm too old.
Yes.
What are they called? And what is that album, and where could people get it if they were interested in your music?
Totally. Yeah. So the album is called Outside of the Movies. You can stream it on any major streaming platform. It's on Spotify. It's on, you know, Apple Music. You can also go to my website, which is finapipia.com, PHINAPIPIA.com. And there's, you can order the songbook, which is, you know, it's a 36-page fully illustrated book with easy piano music and chord charts for all of the songs on the album. And you can get in touch with me. I would love to, you know, hear from folks and, you know, tell me what you thought of the show. Say hi. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing I have to ask is, there's anything else that you would like to say, talk about, or just describe your state of being right at the moment?
Oh my gosh. There's, you know, this, I feel like we covered so much.
I know.
And I know. It's crazy. It's just been a delight to be here. I've had so much fun connecting with other artists and connecting with audience members here. So yeah, thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's been delightful. It's been
Awesome.
delightful talking, and thank you so much for
Likewise.
showing up at the Vancouver Fringe, and I
Totally.
hope you come back every single year.
I hope so too.
So this is the last one for the Fringe. Now we have pick of the Fringe next week. I'm gonna have to pick these boys' brains about actually doing another one, so I can tell you what that's about, because we have the awards tonight. But really, just a huge thank you to everyone involved in the Fringe, all the artists, all the donors, all the volunteers, all the sponsors, all our cultural partners who've shown up. Thank you so much. All our funders, which we could not be here without you. And yeah, you know, here we are, just about a few, like, I'm going to say maybe 10 hours now away from actually finishing up this year, and we'll be back next year. I think we're starting on the 7th of September and going to the 17th, but do not quote me on that. But anywho, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and bye.